So recently, I had to eat a slice of humble pie, because I was suckered in by the hype of an exciting achievement. You might recall a science news segment that I released at the start of the year, about how China put a lander on the far side of the moon. I mean, that's pretty impressive, legitimately, and it still is. The lander was equipped with a little biomodule, which was a self-contained habitat that had silkworm eggs and a few species of plants. The idea here was that it would be a self-sustaining habitat, and it would demonstrate if animals and plants could grow in lunar gravity, and if they could, how that lunar gravity would affect their development. At first, the experiment seemed to be going along splendidly, and to make things even better, some of the cotton plants went into bloom, which makes them the first plants to bloom on another celestial body. They're not the first plants to bloom in space, and if you're curious about that, the first plants that bloomed in space were the plants that were grown and harvested for food on the International Space Station. Now, when the Chinese lander successfully landed on the moon, at first, I was thinking that this experiment was really exciting and it had a really interesting premise, and I wanted to see where it went. I wanted to see what came out of it. But then, the lunar night came, and with it came a sudden drop to extremely cold temperatures. Either deliberately or accidentally, the biomodule was not protected from the cold. It didn't even have any kind of internal heater, and the sprouting cotton plants subsequently died. The temperatures inside the module were described as being so extreme and fluctuating so much that it's believed nothing else is alive. I mean, at least there's no new signs of life from any organism in the module, and so it's expected that pretty much everything died. But that leaves me in a weird spot because I'm not really sure what their plan is here. Perhaps it's because I'm thinking about this experiment in the context of agriculture on the moon, right? So when they do this experiment, it seems kind of silly to me that they would expose them to the cold. I mean, presumably, if you had a lunar colony and, you had like permanent habitat modules that humans could live in, I mean, you would think that they would be sealed and warmed, and the biggest variables that you would have to deal with would be the lunar gravity and the radiation exposure. There are feasible ways to block the radiation. I mean, you can make a radiation shield, or you can build your module station underground, under a sufficiently thick layer of dirt or ice. I mean, you can totally block the radiation that way and make it totally safe for humans to live in. But gravity is the only variable that we can't really control for. And the lunar gravity is the only variable that we'd really care for in such a context for indoor hydroponic agricultural production. But the nature of this Chinese experiment seems to preclude this hypothesis, because they didn't keep the chamber heated. They just exposed the organisms to the lunar cold, and I don't really know why. If they intended for the organisms to be subjected to these cold temperatures, as well as the low gravity and perhaps the radiation, I don't know how well the module shielded them from radiation. Presumably not a whole lot, but I don't know. I don't know. But if they did want to expose these organisms to cold temperatures, they have to know that this will stall the growth and threaten or even kill almost every organism in there. The lunar night lasts for 2 weeks, and the cotton plants died within 9 days. So take what you will about the chances for the other organisms. Liu Hanlong is the head of the experiment at Chongqing University, and at a recent press conference, he said the temperature inside the 1-liter canister reached minus 52 degrees Celsius, which is minus 62 degrees Fahrenheit. And after that, it was said, quote, "The experiment had ended," unquote. Now, maybe it's just me, but I think that this whole thing was kind of absurd. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. They went so far as to build the module and attach it to their lander and include its mass in their calculations and in the amount of fuel that they used. And they put it on the moon. I mean, that's an incredible feat. This is a really amazing opportunity, especially to perform an experiment like this. But they didn't even take it seriously enough to give the module a heater so that the life inside wouldn't freeze and die. It turns out that this whole experimental concept of this self-sustaining habitat module was the winning entry in a survey of schoolchildren across the country of China. The Chinese Space Agency asked the students from all over the country to give their suggestions, and this one, the biohabitat module, that one won. Now it makes a little bit more sense why this seems to be a tacky addition for the good PR, instead of a serious, legitimate scientific experiment. But perhaps I'm being too cynical. Perhaps, and this is quite likely, perhaps there's some nuance here, or some deeper aspect of the experiment that I'm unable to realize with my superficial understanding of the whole thing. I mean, I don't have a view inside the Chinese laboratories. I can't tell you what they're doing. I can't tell you what their deeper plans are. But you would think that there would be a deeper plan here, instead of just having this whole thing go to waste. But this whole mission, this whole pseudo-experiment, seems like a really big letdown. Although the optimist in me still thinks that we can learn something from this. The organisms might all be dead, but now they'll decompose, so we can see how stuff decomposes in lunar gravity, and we can see how the bacteria and the parasites inside the flora and fauna will handle their new lunar environment. I'm expecting them to struggle, and the decomposition process will be slow, but I'm always happy to be surprised.